Hey y'all, we have a National Earth Day observance coming up April the 22nd, and I thought you would be interested to figure out how and why Earth Day was instituted, how it's observed, its historical significance, and whether Americans should observe Earth Day at all. I'm bankruptcy and personal injury attorney Greg Niblock. You may know me as the reset button lawyer, helping people hit the reset button on their bills and on the insurance company if they've been injured or killed in an accident. Man, I spent days researching this and found all kinds of crazy, scary stuff to talk about. As a result, it would take way too long to put everything into one video, so we broke it up into 3 videos. This is video number 1, and the next will be posted tomorrow, and the third the following day. All right, are you ready? Earth Day began on April 22nd, 1970, allegedly to protest environmental ignorance and demand better for our planet. The movement that created Earth Day helped create wonderful sounding legislation in the U.S., such as the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, and the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. I remember back in 1970 when I was in the 3rd grade at Mapleville Elementary. Our class had a project for Earth Day where I drew a poster of Earth Day, the Earth Day flag. And I got 3rd place out of my class. I don't know why I remember that. Of course, the kids didn't know what the observance was other than don't litter, keep your part of the world cleaned up, don't waste things, and plant trees. Seemed okay, pretty innocent. As things have progressed with this observance, and after experiencing decades of watching the people leading this observance, I've had an uneasy feeling and decided to dig in below the surface to see what's really going on. I think you're going to be surprised at what I found. Some examples of what younger school kids are taught from this observance are: 1. Turn off the water faucet when brushing your teeth or your hands. 2. Unplug appliances. 3. Wash clothes in cold water. 4. Turn off the heat dry function on the dishwasher. Better yet, wash them by hand. I don't think mom and dad really like that. And it's not going to save much. Plus, it's going to be more water involved. Number 5. Invest in a bidet. Americans use 36.5 billion rolls of toilet paper every year. That's about 15 million trees. And I would say, really? You're going to shoot cold water onto your rear end or personal parts? How are you going to dry them? Anyway, plus consider the water usage. And trees, they're a renewable resource. Ask anyone that depends on the timber industry for a livelihood that lives down in South Arkansas. And then 6, stop drinking out of disposable plastic bottles. Replace single-use bottles with reusable containers. But I thought we kind of recycled those. All right, 7. Switch to reusable bags. Do not use plastic bags. Well, I was kind of thinking plastic bags were reusable. 8. Turn off the lights when leaving a room. Well, that's great, and I do that myself. Sometimes, though, if you turn them off and on way too much, you might blow the bulb. All right, number 9. Plant a tree. Work to replace the trees that are being cut down every year to create things that we use every day. I think we all love trees. I know I do. So plant trees. But remember, the trees we use for wood products are an agricultural product that are planted, cultivated, and then harvested just like rice, soybean, milo, corn, and the like. Number 10, organize a cleaning effort. Spend the day at the beach or a park and pick up all the litter that you can find. That sounds great. So, some of the suggestions are okay, and some are a little goofy and unworkable, the bidet. Obviously, I think reasonable steps to conserve and reduce waste is great. I grew up with the philosophy of waste not, want not. If things stop there, maybe I could just let it go. However, this is just the surface. Earth Day has a very unfortunate association with people who use outlandish environmental scare tactics on the American citizenry and to the greater world to create the supposed need for authoritarian government that must envelop our nation and the world under the banner of saving our planet. All right, now let's talk about the founders and leaders' beliefs and apocalyptic predictions of the Earth Day movement. The senator that proposed legislation naming April 22nd, 1970 as the first Earth Day is Gaylord Nelson, a Wisconsin Democrat senator who was inspired by the energy of the anti-war protest of Vietnam. He believed the fate of the living planet is the most important issue facing mankind. This statement is troubling to me because it fails to recognize that God Almighty created the planet and mankind in God's own image. God knows his planet and mankind, and God, is in control of when the earth will be destroyed. This statement seems to imply that Earth is our God or goddess. Paul R. Ehrlich was one of the Earth Day leaders and became well known for his controversial 1968 book, The Population Bomb, in which he famously stated that in the 1970s, hundreds of millions of people will starve to death in spite of any crash programs embarked on now. Among the solutions he suggested in that book was population control, including various forms of coercion. Anyway, here are the apocalyptic predictions of the prophets of doom made by the Earth Day organizers of the 1970s. Number 1, civilization will end within 15 to 30 years unless immediate action is taken against problems facing mankind. Number 2, we are in an environmental crisis which threatens the survival of this nation and the world as a suitable place of human habitation. Number 3, man must stop pollution and conserve his resources, not merely to enhance his existence, but to save the race from intolerable deterioration and possible extinction. Number 4, the overpopulation crisis will cause imminent mass famine, war, disease, the collapse of civilization. It will inevitably and completely outstrip whatever small increases in food supplies we make. The death rate will increase until at least 100 to 200 million people per year will be starving to death during the next 10 years. Number 5, between 1980 and 1989, some 4 billion people, including 65 million Americans, will perish in the great die-off. It is already too late to avoid mass starvation. Number 6, in 10 years, all important animal life in the sea will be extinct. Large areas of coastline will have to be evacuated because of the stench of dead fish. Number 7, in a decade, urban dwellers will have to wear gas masks to survive air pollution. By 1985, air pollution will have reduced the amount of sunlight reaching the earth by 1/2. Number 8, at the present rate of nitrogen buildup, it's only a matter of time before light will be filtered out to the atmosphere and none of our land will be usable. Number 9, air pollution is certainly going to take hundreds of thousands of lives in the next 4 years alone in a scenario where 200,000 Americans will die in 1973 during a smog disaster that will occur in New York and Los Angeles. Number 10, due to chlorinated hydrocarbons, Americans born since 1946 will have a life expectancy of 49 years. And if current patterns continue, it would reach 42 years by 1980, when it might level out. Of course, according to the CDC report, life expectancies in the U.S. is 78.8 years. Number 11, decaying organic pollutants will use up all the oxygen in America's rivers, causing freshwater fish to suffocate. Number 12, in 25 years, that'd be 1995, somewhere between 75% and 80% of all species of living animals will be extinct. Number 13, that since more than 9/10 of the original tropical rainforest will be removed in most areas within the next 30 years, that would be the year 2000, it is expected that half of the organisms in these areas will vanish with it. Number 14, by the year 2000, we will have used up all crude oil. There will be no more. Number 15, humanity will totally run out of copper shortly after the year 2000. Lead, zinc, tin, gold, and silver will be gone before 1990. Number 16, the world has been chilling sharply for about 20 years. If present trends continue, the world will be about 4 degrees colder for the global mean temperature in 1990, but 11 degrees colder in the year 2000. This is about twice what it would take to put us in an ice age. They're predicting an ice age. Okay, so what's the cure? Earth Day leaders and adherents' cure for the impending doom called for the wholesale suppression of human freedom so that governments could take control of the population. Now let's stop for a second. Can you believe this nonsense? Which of the 16 predictions ever came close to being true? Not a single one. And now consider what has been their greatest cry in the last couple of decades: global warming. And since then, they've changed it to climate change recently. Yet humans are to blame and government must control them. And as we said, in the 1970s, it was global cooling, if you can believe it. Of course, it then went to global warming, then to climate change. This is truly odd. These folks always point to CO2 emissions as the cause, and it is always caused by human activity. However, they fail to acknowledge that human activity only makes up 4 to 5% of total global emissions, with 95 to 96% of CO2 emissions coming from the earth, nature. And they fail to account for the sun's ups and downs in its output. Additionally, energy-related carbon emissions in the U.S. have been falling since their peak in 2007 and now are at their lowest levels. And the Earth Day movement really had very little, if anything, to do with this amazing greening of America. Rather, it's mostly because of hydraulic fracturing and the increased substitution of natural gas for coal as a fuel source for our power plants. So now let's talk about, what do Earth Day organizers believe and call for now? They say climate change represents the biggest challenge to the future of humanity and the life support systems that make our world habitable. Human contributions to the greenhouse effect are the root cause. Unless every country in the world steps up and steps up with urgency and ambition, we are consigning current and future generations to destruction. This is a key moment for citizens, institutions, and organizations everywhere to demonstrate our shared demand for a bold, transformative change, a call for action at all levels of government, a call for nations to increase their national commitment to the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change. So the time is now for citizens to call for a greater global ambition to tackle our climate crisis. Here are some of their current predictions. Number 1, the water supply is the ultimate victim of climate change. Water scarcity due to increased evaporation due to global warming. By 2050, 6 out of 10 people worldwide will lack regular access to water. Number 2, global sea levels are rising at an alarming rate, 6.7 inches over the last century. That's 100 years. Sea levels will rise 4 feet by the year 2100, which is 80 years in the future. And that's a conservative estimate, so they say. One of Earth Day's adherents summed everything up in a scary sentence on April 18th, 2019. The Earth moves without us, and it's now evident would be better off without us. All right, now let's talk about the starving polar bear, the poster child of man-made global warming. You may recall back in 2017 a video shot by National Geographic photographers on Somerset Island that was starving for food on barren land that looked horrifyingly pitiful. The magazine said, "This is what climate change looks like." And then it went on to explain because of melting sea ice precipitated by climate change, more of these mammals are starving. 2.5 billion people watched this video in horror. This polar bear immediately became the poster child for man-made global warming. The starving polar bear video probably did more to advance the cause of climate change than anything. However, it's all based on a lie. Scientists accused the National Geographic of being loose with the facts, and they had to admit it. And their quote was, "There was no evidence that the bear's condition was the result of climate change. The bear simply could have been old, ill, or suffering from a degenerative disease." In other words, they flat out lied to us. Here's other troublesome facts Earth Day adherents don't want you to know about the polar bears. They are not facing extinction. In fact, their numbers have been increasing, not decreasing. The polar bear population is roughly about 5 times what it was in the 1950s when it was 5,000, and 3 to 4 times what it was when they became protected in the 1970s, which was around 10,000. In 1984, the numbers were 25,000. In 2008, there were more than 25,000 in the Arctic. In 2018, the new global midpoint estimate is at more than 30,000. The Earth Day movement, in my humble estimation, is based on fallacies, outlandish predictions of apocalyptic doom that are not going to come true, and some out and out lies. This begs the question of, why do some people gravitate to this? And why do the leaders continue to promote the cause of radical environmentalism? I have come up with 2 theories. 1, the desire to control people through government such as communism, socialism. And 2, the desire to be part of something greater than themselves through worship, sort of like religion.